GrokTALK. GrokTALK.
Welcome back to GrokTALK. I am working on finding the right phone number. 4439 is correct. Yeah, we're having a little trouble with the phone and getting in touch with our next guest. It's all our fault, I am almost guaranteed. But hey, you get what you pay for, right? It's free. So, here we go. I gotta turn
for
skip
free,
up.
you get amateurs. We
For
do our
free.
best to put a little polish on it, but fun it will always be.
That's true. Anyway, so as soon as we get a hold of our guest,
Hello, Joe.
he just got a hold of him now. Scientists respond to the Obama administration's National Climate Assessment 2014.
Nope, we ended 11.
Hang on, we're gonna bring him in. So I'm just gonna stop
Are you able to talk with us?
yapping if he's available.
Oh, okay. Well, I will call you back in 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alrighty. He's almost ready. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's all right. I caught him off guard. Anyway, we're going to be talking about the National Climate Assessment from the Obama administration came out, and you probably heard about it. We may have mentioned it. If you hadn't, it was ridiculous and crazy, and they've changed
It's political.
It's totally political. The National Climate Assessment 2014 NCA is a masterpiece of marketing that shows for the first time the full capabilities of the Obama administration to spin a scientific topic as they see fit without regard to the underlying facts. With hundreds of pages written by hundreds of captive scientists and marketing specialists, the administration presents their case for extreme climate alarm. In their rebuttal, as independent scientists, we know that apparent evidence of climate change, however scary, is not proof of anything. Science derives its objectivity from robust logic and honest evidence repeatedly tested by all knowledgeable scientists, not just those paid to support the administration's version of global warming, climate change, climate disruption, or whatever their marketing specialists call it today. We are asked to believe that humans are drastically changing the Earth's climate by burning fossil fuels. The problem with their theory is very simple. It is not true. Here we address the administration's basic thesis and the essential evidence that they claim support extreme concern. The theory of catastrophic anthropogenic global warming, CAGW, is based on a string of inferences that begins with the assumptions that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas and that we are slowly driving up the atmospheric concentration by burning fossil fuels. It is therefore claimed, as self-evident, that the global average surface temperature has already risen significantly and will continue to do so. Higher GAST is then presumed to lead to all sorts of negative consequences, especially extreme weather. They promote their climate models as a reliable way to predict the future climate, but these models dramatically fail basic verification tests. Nowhere do they admit to these well-known failures. Instead, we are led to believe that their climate models are close to perfection. So they released this document as a fact check, and they took a number of claims, I think there's 7 or 8 or so, basic claims from the NCA, and demonstrated how they are nonsense. And in a couple of minutes, we'll have Joe on to talk about that. In the meantime, Jeff Chittister's in the room. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, guys, how's it going?
Good. How you doing?
Outstanding.
We always like guests who show up early.
Yes.
Well, I just came from my radio show.
Yeah.
Popped up here early.
Cool.
Very
excellent.
busy out there.
You were talking about muffins or something, or
Well,
cupcakes. That's what it was. When I was driving up, I was listening.
I'm
to
the mainstream radio guy, so I can't pound the hell out of politics all the time because they tell me listeners leave.
They don't.
Yeah, it's kind of
They
bad.
don't. Now, well, I do like to highlight small business, and so whenever I get a chance to highlight small business, it's the second most important topic we can talk about when we have the ability to talk about it after politics.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to highlight that 75% of our economy relies on them here in New Hampshire, and so, it's just so much fun at that part. Plus, we had Congressman King on, though.
Did you, I
Oh,
missed that.
I like him.
He's running around the state today.
And
I-
we didn't know.
we didn't know, and I reminded him the next time he is going to do that he needs to let me bring you up here. He called his scheduler off air to kind of is this something I can do if I will go with Jeff up and go? No, you got to go to this spot next. But he has committed to come here next time he comes.
Because
here.
we have met, we have talked. I've interviewed him before.
Yeah,
And
he's
so
a
have
great
I,
guest.
and he's a great guy.
He's a great guy. He was all fired up this morning. So.
Oh yes, he wants a duel. I like this. I want to see the duel, even if it's just verbal. I want to see the duel.
Who's he want to duel with?
You name it. I mean, anyone who can irk off Boehner and Schumer in the same week, got to be a guy I got to be hanging around
Yeah,
with.
he wanted to debate.
He's the real king as opposed to the pretender from Long Island.
No, he wanted to debate Schumer on immigration, and he's all set, and he's really good on the topic too.
Yeah.
He really, really is.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites.
Yep.
So.
You want to wait? It's 5 after.
Yes, I'm going to try again.
Okay. Why don't I run the
Because
ad
he thought it was at 11.
Oh, I told him 10, but that's okay.
Okay.
All right, let me. I'll run our 60 seconds. We'll be right back. Hang on, I got to push some buttons and slide some things, and we'll talk to Dr. Joe DeLeo. Hold on a second.
She tried to make us believe she was a fiscal conservative, but State Senator Nancy Stiles has been deceiving New Hampshire taxpayers. Like a wolf in sheep's clothing, she claimed to be one of us, pretending to blend in, but all along voting like a liberal Democrat. She voted to raise your gas tax by another 23%, taking a bigger bite out of our wallets every time we're at the pump. And oh, how she drooled at the opportunity to vote to expand Obamacare, which will result in higher taxes and longer wait times in the emergency room. And now the Senate wants to pass a bill to prevent us from criticizing Senator Stiles' vote. Call Senator Stiles at 603-918-0553 and tell her that we're on to her wolf in sheep's clothing routine. Tell her to stop pretending to be a fiscal conservative and start voting like one. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
All right, welcome back to GrokTALK. I am Steve McDonald here with Skip Murphy, Mike Rogers, and Jeff Chittister has joined us a little early. But we're not here to talk to Jeff, but Jeff's going to hear and we're going to let him talk because we would like to bring in our next guest. Recently received a doctorate from Linden State College, an honorary doctorate. He is one of the main forces behind Weather Bell Analytics, and in a long ago future life was part of the beginning of the Weather Channel. And we always like to have him on because he's a smart guy who knows a lot about the climate. Dr. Joe DeLeo, welcome to the program. Joe, you there? Did you call him on a different line? Joe, you there? Hello?
Line 2.
Line 2?
Joe?
Joe? Did we lose him?
Hello.
Oh, there you are. Hi. Good morning. We're having phone problems today.
And we just lost him.
And we just dropped him. All right, he's going to try to get him back. I'm going to put... Joe, you there?
No, he's
Hello?
gone.
He's gone. Yeah, that was fun. Turn that off. Yeah. Wait, Doctor, not on the line, Joe DeLeo. Yeah, this is dead air.
There. Okay, I'm going to hold this on.
I'm gonna.
This time, do the right buttons this time.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi. How you doing? Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
Great. Thanks. Sorry for all the confusion and the phone problems and everything else. We're really glad to have you here to talk about you and a bunch of great folks came up with a rebuttal to the Obama administration's National Climate Assessment. And I'm not going to waste a lot of time introducing all of that. Why don't you just give us a quick synopsis of what the Obama administration produced? I believe the word you used was propaganda. It wasn't propaganda, but go ahead and tell us what happened and what you guys did.
Well, they did say something that we'll agree with. They said that based on predominance of the evidence that the climate has been changing over the last centuries and gives evidence that it will continue to change for the next century and beyond.
You think it's going to change for longer than that? Just a guess.
The climate has changed over the time we've had a planet.
Isn't that what climate is? I mean,
it's a moving average of conditions, and it's affected by the sun and the oceans and man, and to some degree. But the report that they came out with was to satisfy the environmental community and push forward. Hopefully, they're hoping for a carbon tax that would support their other programs, income redistribution, but also renewables, which they put big faith in. And most every claim that they made is refutable with real data.
Okay, so let's talk about a couple of those. I know you did this, instead of just saying, look, we think your study is nonsense, you took actual things that they claimed were facts and you rebutted them, correct?
That's right.
Okay, so first line of evidence, fundamental understanding of GH gases, the conclusion that human influences are the primary driver of recent climate change is based on multiple lines of independent evidence. The first line of evidence is our fundamental understanding of how certain gases trap heat, how the climate system responds to increases in these gases, and how other human and natural factors influence climate. And you guys responded.
Well, basically, that's what they built into their models that were to predict the changes in temperature and other factors. And for the last 20 years, they failed. There's been no warming for 18 years. In the United States, winters have cooled. There's been no increasing. In fact, sea levels are decreasing, are increasing at half the rate they were in the last century. There's no increase in record highs over time. In fact, they're decreasing. The big decade was the 1930s. Hurricanes are becoming less frequent. Tornado also. Last year was the quietest tornado season on record. Droughts and floods, even NOAA couldn't find any evidence for anything more than clustering of droughts and floods in certain decades. No long-term changes in that. No changes in wildfires since 1984. Last year was the quietest year, despite the catastrophic wildfire in Colorado. The number of wildfires was the lowest on the record. And deaths are increasing due to man's impact on weather. Ice is increasing, despite what they're claiming. If greenhouse gases are driving the climate and their models are based on greenhouse gases, the models are failing, so therefore the theory fails.
Has the model actually fallen out of its lower bound yet? You know that graph with the
Right.
The bands of sort of 90% confidence, 50% confidence, etc. And the last I saw, reality was in danger of breaking out of the lower bound. Has it broken out yet?
It will shortly. It continues flat. The temperature, it's right near the bottom of the lowest band, and in some of the models they used in a scenario or assumption that we would hold CO2 constant at the 1992 level, and that hasn't taken place. We've increased 11-12% in CO2 since then. So those less significant warming scenarios are even failing. We're warming at that rate or lower, even though CO2 has gone up.
Right,
Now-
and of course they emphasize CO2, but methane is a bigger contributor, and that is not so much a man-made phenomenon.
No, methane, cattle comes out of the ground. CO2 is largely natural too. It comes out of the oceans. When living matter decays, it gives off CO2. So most of it, man is responsible for 4% each year of the CO2 that goes into the atmosphere. The rest is natural.
Skip?
I have a question for you, Dr. DeLeo, and this is Skip. Jerry Brown kind of put his foot in his mouth this week when he said that because of climate change, the sea was going to rise to the point where LAX was going to be covered with water. It's 100 feet above sea level. Yeah, that's about the kind of response everybody should be giving him, because if I remember right, the seas are rising at about 0.44 millimeters a year. My question is, we hear all this stuff and we hear doom, disaster, and the whole bit, and I keep looking at one little country that's kind of managed this pretty well just by building dikes. Why is everybody so up in arms that we can't adapt? And that's my question. Why do these nitwits, and I've got 2 STEM degrees, one in biology, one in computer science, and I look at this stuff, and having done some biological modeling in the past, we can adapt. That's what humans are. We're the most adaptable creatures on the earth. We can't figure out how to adapt to these changes, and I keep putting that next to the fact that more people die of cold than they do of heat.
You're exactly right. And that was proven in Europe over the last decade. They got a break this year, but they have had some brutal winters in Europe and Asia, and they talk about 280,000 people have died from cold over there, and but they still talk about the 2,000 that died in the heat wave of 2003. Heat and cold can kill, but cold is much more dangerous. And we came very close to real problems in the United States this past winter in New Hampshire. And in the Northeast, we came within a few days of running out of coal, which is used as a backup for natural gas and in the power plants. And the natural gas prices had spiked because of the tremendous demand. And we would have had, like Canada, every province in Canada except British Columbia had rolling blackouts and brownouts this winter. And when we go, without power and our furnaces shut down, that's dangerous. And a lot of people had oil problems this winter, getting oil, paying for the oil, and frozen pipes were a problem. It could be a lot worse next year when the EPA regulations kick in and they shut down a lot of the coal plants that were used in backup, running furiously to try to keep up this past winter.
Joe, you guys, Weather Bell Analytics, you guys do. You specialize in predicting long-term estimates about what the weather trends are going to be. Have you guys got a preliminary for next winter yet?
Yes, it looks like it'll be much colder in the east, less cold in the central. Chicago had its coldest December to March since 1872, since records began. They had the most snow ever in Detroit, third most ever in Chicago, most ever in a lot of other places in the Midwest. That cold will be further east this upcoming winter. So we're going to have issues here in the Northeast, I'm afraid.
Well, I'm going to now up my wood purchase that I was going to do this week by another quart of wood.
I was thinking exactly the same thing because my house is heated mostly by electricity by heat pumps, which are very efficient, but you still have to have the electricity. And propane is a very, very expensive way of generating the electricity to run the heat pumps. So
right.
I'll be burning some wood.
And last winter, I think you may have heard that wood pellets were scarce and actually ran out in parts of New England, Maine, and a lot of people had relied on that as their primary source of heat.
If you try to tell people, I've always talked about all these big government programs and the spending and how what you're really doing is setting people up to fail. You're trapping them in a system where they're going to be left out, literally, in the cold in this case.
Yes.
So when you try to make the case, look, it's going to be cold. This is what I do for a living. It's going to be cold. You need to make sure people have electricity and coal and energy and blah, 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 blah. They call you a fearmonger, don't they? I mean...
Yeah. Yes, we're the fearmonger.
Even though people are going to freeze to death. It just drives me crazy. So anyway, back to the assessment. We won't have enough time to go through all of it, but what would you say are some of the worst claims? And let's just revisit those real quick.
Well, extreme events. They keep talking about heat waves are going to get far worse, that they have been getting worse. And the data doesn't support that. If you look at the state heat records and cold records, those are unmanipulated by the government. They can't change them because every TV station in the country has the records for their local area.
Is there a way to get at those? I wanted to ask you that. Is there any place that keeps track of those on the state level, or you have to go to the TV station sites?
You probably have to go to the National Weather Service in the state, in Portland or Boston covers New England, and you can find Concord data out of Portland and Boston data and data for the rest of New England out of Boston. And that's where we look. But the 1930s of the 50 states, had 23 of the heat records, and 38 of them occurred before 1960. And since the 1940s, we've had more record cold than heat. If you look at all of the stations, again, just the raw data, unmanipulated, the number of 100-degree days and 90-degree days has been declining since the 30s. So that isn't happening, but they claim it's going to happen, and that that's going to be a killer. Secretary of State Kerry, you may have heard, he was in Mexico this week, and he said it's never been as hot as it was in Vietnam and Europe. Well, in Europe, last week it was 84 to 89 degrees. Can you imagine that? He said all-time records, unprecedented. Well, of course, Russia was 111 for their all-time record, Germany 104, Italy 119, Turkey 120, and Spain 122 for their all-time record. So it's 30 degrees away from the all-time record.
Yeah, really. All you can do is sigh. You said a very important word, which is unmanipulated. And one of the sites that I go to quite often is What's Up With That, which is one of the premier sites for, just an ordinary kind of guy looking at stuff versus all the analytic stuff that you guys go into. And his bugaboo, one of his main bugaboos, is looking at all of these temperature gathering sites which have become urbanized or that things have grown up around them. And he also shows a lot of pictures of sites that have now become part of airports sitting outside of an air conditioner, out on the asphalt. So they are giving those kinds of bad readings that they should be out in a grass field, yada, 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 so that really is. How do you take care of that stuff when you say go to Portland, go to Boston to get unmanipulated data? How do we know that they haven't? Because that's part of what we're hearing. They have been manipulating all the data.
You're right. There is, when you look at the rural, the urban areas, you have to be careful because the cities have grown around where they measured temperatures or they're relocated at the airport. And Anthony was a believer in global warming until he went to a local site to investigate how well they took care of what they used to use to shelter the thermometer, the Stephenson shelter, and he found a thermometer was next to a building, next to an air conditioner, on a road, and he said, "Boy, that's not what the the criteria is for sighting." So he said, "I wonder if this is an isolated incident." So he organized a volunteer group nationwide to go to all of the observing sites and see if they met the government's own criteria, which they have established, and over 88% did not. The government itself, the Government Accounting Office, actually did their own assessment and scolded NOAA, and they said 41% of the stations in the United States are so bad that they have to be dealt with. and that gets into the records, and every time they say this month ranked the third warmest or fourth warmest, a lot of that has to do with bad data. They once had an adjustment when they first started compiling temperatures for the U.S. to account for urbanization, and that kind of adjusted a little bit for that, but they removed that in 2008 to make the warming look more significant and then more in line with their own models.
Joe, didn't I actually read a few years ago that in fact they did the absolute opposite? Not only did they not correct down for the overly hot stations, they in fact tried to correct up the rest of the stations to make them fall in line with the warmer trend.
Yeah, that's called homogenization. That was another trick. They said, we'll replace that urbanization adjustment with some new algorithms that will detect when we have the station move, but also will homogenize the data, and that just simply blends the urban areas with the rural. So the rural data is no longer pure as it was before, but it's got some of the urban warmth now contaminating it. So it was flat before, but now it's up.
So do we actually have access to the unmanipulated data, the raw data anymore, or so we can actually see what the effect of the heat islands of the cities and the urban areas are doing compared to the rural areas?
We actually fortunately have had some people that saved old data sets and compare it to the current data set, and it's remarkable how much they've changed it. For example, 1998. In 1999, even James Hansen admitted that there was a lot of year-to-year variability, but the 1930s was the warmest decade, and 1934 the warmest year, because 1934 was 1.1 degree Fahrenheit warmer than 1998, that super El Nino year. Well, the government had to then explain why that was the case, and the rest of the world was warming. So when they removed the urban heat island adjustment and made the changes in 2008, suddenly now 1998, instead of being 1.1 degrees cooler, was 0.2 degrees warmer than 1934.
Oh, great. You know, and every time I hear stuff like this, I just go back to the late 70s when I was in college, so I've just dated myself. And time after time I'd read the newspaper stories, we're entering global cooling.
Right.
And I keep going, this is just a cycle, guys. We just don't have enough data. So I just from that, I just tend to toss this stuff off the roof.
Yes, and the factors that and that's been my, ever since I was a college professor and worked at the Weather Channel and then at WSI and now Weather Bell, we constantly look at natural factors in order to predict the seasons ahead, the ocean cycles and the sun. And they're all pointing toward a significant cooling now, like the 40s to the 70s, perhaps more like the early 1800s, 1798 to 1816, the year without a summer, because the sun is going to a deep slumber, the Atlantic will turn cold, the Pacific has already turned cold, and those three factors, when they're in place, we have our coldest climates. And so that's where we think we're going. We think we've seen some previews of that in recent years, this year in the United States and recent years in Europe and in China, where Shanghai Harbor froze a year ago, not this winter. And we think more of that is coming. One other thing, though, those same cycles tell us that we have to be worried this summer along the East Coast for hurricane landfall, because we're very much like it was 60 years ago in the mid-50s and in the oceans. And we had 8 hurricanes, significant landfalling hurricanes along the East Coast from 54 to 60. So Irene and Sandy may be just a prelude to additional hurricanes in the next few years. And, of course, they'll jump on that, saying it is unprecedented and due to global warming.
Joe, I got to break in because we're running out of time. I want to thank you so much for spending some time with GrokTALK. It's weatherbell.com, right?
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for being on GrokTALK. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you. Bye.
This is GrokTALK. I'm Steve here with Skip Murphy, Mike Rogers, and we'll be right back with Jeff Chittister.
New Hampshire is famous for scenic drives, but they're tough to enjoy when you're on your way to the doctor. Because Obamacare limits your choices, some will have to drive more than an hour to see a doctor. What's health insurance worth if care isn't there when you need it? Jean Shaheen voted for Obamacare, putting your doctors and hospitals further out of reach. Tell Senator Shaheen Obamacare is not working for New Hampshire.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
Senator Jean Shaheen said, if you like your current health plan, you can keep it. That's not true, Senator. 22,000 New Hampshire citizens have been kicked off their insurance plans. Hospitals in Rochester, Concord, and Portsmouth, they aren't allowed to provide care under the exchange. Senator, you were wrong in your comments. You should apologize for your misleading remarks. I'm calling Senator Shaheen at 750-3004 and telling her I want my doctor back. You should too.
Paid for by SaberPac.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidate committee.
GrokTALK is 2 hours of news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com. But don't limit yourself to GrokTALK. Check us out at GraniteGrok.com. Follow us on Facebook or Twitter by searching Granite Grok.
Grok TV.